Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the global food issues, today we are discussing the Freedom from Hunger campaign. This program is basically one of the programs about the awareness and aid programs launched by the United Nations. The Freedom from Hunger campaign was launched by Food and Agriculture Organization in 1960. The main purpose of this program was a vast educational and operational effort involving changes in the mental attitudes and social habits and customs of practically the entire human race. The campaign publicized the information about the problems, the needs, and the possibilities of the needy countries. And for this purpose, so many projects were launched and were completed successfully to produce more food and to provide more food to the needy nations for good mental and physical health. The United Nations have also started several programs after such surveys, after such data collection about the food deficiency. The programs which were started by the United Nations is the Food and Agriculture Organization, UNDP, UNIDO, World Health Organization. You have seen the role of the World Health Organization in the corona, and the UNICEF, etc. to solve the issue of the food shortage existing throughout the world. But remember that these programs are operated under Title II of the Food for Peace program, in which support is provided from government to government, and the agency or the organization don't get involved in the internal matters of the state or of the government who they are supporting. But after that, they have included and involved the religious leader, the private business community, the industrialist, the professionals, the youth, and in a systematic manner, and individuals to help the member countries or the needy countries in a systematic and coordinated manner to provide maximum help to them with minimum cost. Member countries also have been asked to establish funds. Remember that for such programs, funds are always required. So they have asked the member countries who are able to provide grants to establish the Freedom from Hunger Foundation to raise funds for such programs and help the nations. Remember that in the very beginning, the United Nations performed two different surveys. One was in 1946, the second one was in 1952, but in neither survey the population was discussed or was compared with the food shortage or with the food production. Remember that the population from the 1930 to 1960 was doubled from 2 billion to 4 billion. That is, within these 30 years, World War II was also fought, while the population also doubled in that 30 years. So in 1963, in 1963, the third survey was performed, in which the comparison was made between the developed and less developed countries. And also they established some targets. To achieve those targets, once it is stated that the religious leaders were involved, so in 1963, the Pope in his sermon stated that the hunger was existing. But it has been realized after the data collection, after the survey, and now we are aware that more than half of the population is not getting enough food to eat. So it is the responsibility of the entire human race, entire human beings, to provide sufficient food to the needy nations. This was the role of the religious leader, and after that the religious leaders from all religions helped them in this regard and declared it in their sermons to help the people to produce food, to provide food to the needy nations, and come forward for the assistance of the organization who are performing it. The first World Food Conference, which was held in Washington in 1963, that was the basically universal parliament in which 1300 representatives from 107 countries and 65 non-governmental organizations, some government officials, some religious leaders, the industrialists, the private business owners, the individuals, and people from all walks of life contributed in that Congress, the World Food Congress in 1963, in which it was accepted that hunger is a universal human responsibility. It means that the whole world and the world who has enough resources should help the poor or the member countries. The Second World Food Conference was also conducted and held in The Hague, while the Third World Food Congress held in the Washington, in which the same objectives were modified and implemented to raise food, to produce food, and to overcome the hunger. For this purpose, as people from all walks of life have contributed in that universal parliament meetings, so the artists through their art, the writers through their writing, the leaders through their sermon, the religious leaders through their sermons, the political leaders through their wisdom, and the teachers and the trained persons through their volunteer services, and the teaching institutions through courses which they accepted, which they included in their courses, in their degrees, and the scholarships which they granted to the students for the higher studies, to go abroad and study the food production and the food preservation. And also it launched another program, that was the establishment of the teaching institutions in the less developed countries of the world, to educate more people with ease, to overcome the shortage of the food. The FAO also established technology centers for this purpose throughout the world, as they have achieved some projects in the past in which they have convinced the people to produce one crop instead of other crops, such as they have convinced the people to cultivate rice. Some 1000 farmers were convinced, and whose income was increased around 400%. They have established the rice storage centers in Burma or in some other countries to help and produce more food, to preserve the more food. And the industrial sector, the role of the industrial sector was to provide the fertilizers, the pesticides, and the farm machinery, etc., for a quick and easy farming techniques and more scientific farming, to produce more food with minimum charges. And as the fertilizers and the pesticides were donated, so there were no cost on this issue. With no cost, they got the maximum benefit, and in the next year they were the next decades or next years they were able to move from aid to trade. And this is basically the main objective of the United Nations, to bring the needy countries from aid to trade, to help them to establish a good mechanism and upgrade the standard life of the people living over there, and especially of the farming community. World Food Conference was also conducted in the Rome in 1974, in which it was the declaration of the World Food Conference that every human being, whether man, woman, child, and other living beings have the right to healthy food for good physical and mental growth. And it is the responsibility of the developed nations to produce healthy food, to provide healthy food to the needy nations for their good health, for their good physical and mental growth. Similarly, the World Food Conference was held in Iowa in 1976 and in Japan in 1978 with the same objectives, and they worked and expanded their project to provide the healthy food and also studied that what kind of role have been played and in which. But remember that the mutual ventures are always of prime importance, in which the developed countries are providing funds and the developing nations provide them security and public for assistance. So the people from the developing nations serve over there, provide their raw material, and they are processed and different products are prepared with the donations of the with the help of the uh, developed countries, and in this way the developing countries move from aid to trade. In this context, our next lecture will be about the Agency for International Development. And after that, we will discuss the Green Revolution, which will be the last lecture of the global food issues. If you have any question, you can ask in comments. Thank you.